Welcome, everybody. We're just trying to work out the screen sharing, but welcome and thanks for joining us today. I am Julie Brown. I'm the Raptor Migration and Programs Director at the Hawk Migration Association, and we're glad you could be part of our December Lunch and Learn. We are co-hosting today's program with the Harris Center for Conservation Education, and I'll be running things today with Susie Spickle. She's the Community Programs Director and Naturalist at the Harris Center here in New Hampshire. And we're very excited to welcome José, Tavares, and Gama from the Vulture Conservation Foundation to speak about vultures, their work that they do in Europe, restoring the bearded vulture to their former range, among other species. And before we jump in, and as we get things kind of settled here, I'll just give a little background about the Hawk Migration Association. For those of you who are new to our organization, we're a nonprofit with a working board that provides support to the raptor migration monitoring network, and that's across the Americas. So there are 200 hawkwatch sites throughout North, Central, and South America that monitor migration during the spring and fall, and they report those data to our database, hawkcount.org. We provide resources to the monitoring network like standardized protocol, data support, and annual grants for the hawkwatch sites and for raptor research efforts. And we also offer educational resources like our Hawk ID materials. And we are an active partner in the Raptor Population Index, which is a program that produces conservation assessments, population trend analyses, using long-term migration data sets. So you can learn more about HMA and what we do at hawkmigration.org. I will let Susie say a few words about the Harris Center.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks. It's so great to be here. I'm really excited. I'm so excited to be partnering with the Hawk Migration Association. I work for the Harris Center for Conservation Education. It is a land trust in southwestern New Hampshire that has protected over 27,000 acres of land for wildlife and our future. At the heart of the center's mission is to really help people of all ages and from all walks of life make deep and lasting connections to the natural world through programs like this and our education in schools, in area local schools, as well as our work with scientists and community members and researchers in our conservation research. And one big thing that we work on is the Pac-Monadnock Raptor Observatory, where we see a lot of turkey vultures. So I'm so excited to learn about a new type of vulture. And thank you, Julie.
All right. It looks like we still have that gray bar up there on the screen. José, do we want to, is that...
Oh, I was trying something else, so
Okay.
we'll switch to the list. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. No, well,
Just
I can
give me 1 minute.
Sure, we have a minute, so take your time. I'll let everybody know that we are recording as usual. We're also live streaming on our Facebook page, and you can view any of our past lunch and learns on our website. You can scroll down to the What's New section of our homepage or under events and tours. We are muting everybody to avoid distraction, but we'd love you to connect with us. So we encourage you to use the chat to ask questions or make comments, and Susie's going to be reading those questions to the speakers at the end, and feel free to join us to tell us where you're joining from today. Lastly, if you don't receive our newsletter already, that goes out about twice a month, our e-newsletter, you can type your name and email address in the chat, and I'll sign you up. And I will introduce José and Elise, if you guys are almost ready.
Absolutely.
Tavares is the director of the Vulture Conservation Foundation. José has 30 plus years of experience in implementing nature conservation solutions at the VCF since February 2013. José is working towards turning the VCF into a sustainable, effective, leading organization securing the protection of vultures and their habitats. This work involves not only on-the-ground conservation projects and activities on vultures, but also, crucially, organizational development and management. This includes the management of projects in multiple countries, the development of complex partnerships and stakeholder building, and problem solving. And Alice Gama, we worked together at the Kekeldy Hawk Watch 20 years ago, which is amazing. We got to reconnect in Portugal again this fall, which was great. She's the finance and administration manager at VCF and is also based in Portugal. She has a BSc in biology, and between 2003 and 2006, she did fieldwork on raptor migration and breeding in Costa Rica and in the US, and the impact of power lines on bird populations in Portugal. From 2007 to 16, she worked at a local environmental NGO in Northeast Portugal as a conservation manager, overseeing raptor conservation projects. At the VCF since 2016, she's responsible for financial management and supporting the organization's administration and bookkeeping. Even when focused on the administrative side of things, working in vulture conservation at the VCF is truly inspiring and impactful, especially as they focus a lot on creating cooperation initiatives with so many organizations across borders and continents. So welcome to Alice and José. Feel free to get started if we're ready.
Thank you, Julie. So you see the screen? With the
good.
presentation, everything is good.
Yeah.
No
Yep.
gray squares. Great, perfect.
No,
Okay,
thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about our work here in Europe. Thank you all also for attending in the middle of the day in what is surely a very busy Christmas period. I have had some difficulties with my computer, so my colleague Alice Gama is going to share the slides, and I will tell her when to change the slides. So Alice, next one, please. So what I would very much like to tell you is the work that we've been doing in Europe, and I will leave you already with the first message. Restoring vulture populations in Europe is possible, has been done. It's a very great positive story. Next slide, please. And you probably would not, well, I mean, first of all, there are 23 species of vultures across the world. Your turkey vultures, your black vultures, your condors are part of this mix. What I will be focusing on here is mostly the old world vultures, and in particular the European vultures. Next slide, please. In Europe, we really have got 4 vulture species, and going from the which are here in the same picture, and going from the smallest to the largest. You've got the Egyptian vulture, which is our only migratory vulture. It's the one on the right hand side of the picture with a yellow beak and white plumage. You then have got the griffon vulture on the left hand side, the commonest of our species, the Cinereus vulture, the European black vulture, those 2 large vultures that appear in the picture, and finally the very special bearded vulture, or lammergeier as it used to be called. Next please. In fact, we actually have got a 5th vulture species in Europe right now, which is the Rupel's vulture, and this is a recent recolonization from Africa, which in itself is a very interesting story, but I will not go into this because of time. Next slide, please. And you would not think of Europe as a continent of vultures. If somebody had asked, where can I go and watch thousands of vultures in one place 40 years ago, I would say go to a city like this. And this photo is taken in Mumbai, India, where you would see thousands of Indian whiteback vultures feeding on garbage on a garbage dump. This situation is nowhere to be seen in India right now. Asian vultures are extremely rare because they've declined by 99% due to a veterinary drug called diclofenac. Next slide, please. If I ask you the same question about 20 years ago, probably the answer would be, well, go to Africa, the quintessential African landscape, a group of vultures feeding on a carcass somewhere on the African savanna. Next slide, please. This situation is now extremely rare because Africa has been going through a major vulture crisis. Vultures have disappeared left, right, and center across Africa. Next slide, please. They have been killed by their hundreds and thousands across the continent, so much so that 7 of the 11 species of vultures that occur in Africa are today critically endangered or endangered. Next slide, please. And they have been dying really because of this massive poisoning crisis. Today, your best chance to see thousands of vultures in one place of at least 4 species is indeed Europe. Next slide, please. And this is because the population of vultures in the continent has increased significantly, particularly in Western Europe. And in orange there, you've got the vulture distribution in Europe, and particularly in Europe, particularly in Western Europe, in countries like Portugal, Spain, France, and the Alps, the vulture population has increased. This increase is now being observed also in Eastern Europe, in the Balkans, and only one species, the Egyptian vulture, is still suffering some local declines, even though the population is globally stable. Next slide, please. So this is really the first message that I would like to leave you. Europe is really a land of vultures, is really a land of vulture conservation best practice, and vultures in Europe is a very, very positive story. Next slide, please. And this is very important because we live in a time of doom and gloom. Well, regarding politics, regarding society, but also regarding biodiversity. And I think hope is really important. We need positive examples to show that we can make the difference. Next slide, please. Of course, vultures are not the easiest species to work for. Most people don't like to work with. Most people don't like vultures. They associate vultures with dead, with not such a positive, image. Next slide, please. These scenes of a group of vultures scavenging on a corpse and eating rotten, meat are not particularly pretty. Next slide, please. And therefore, vultures are indeed portrayed all across the world in different types of media as negative, sanguinary, aggressive. Next slide, please. Ugly. Next slide, please. Stupid, like the vultures in the Jungle Book. And the next slide. So much so that people now call the bad politicians or the bad capitalists vultures. At least in the old world, there is the vulture politician, there is the vulture capitalism that is provoking disaster in our society. Next slide. Yet vultures are extremely important. They play a unique role in our ecosystems. They are scavengers. This means that they usually don't capture live prey. They really eat dead animals. And they are the group of birds that really specialized on this unique ecosystem function, which is scavenging. Next slide. They are, if you want, nature's cleanup crew. They are the equivalent of the people that collect the garbage from our cities. In this case, they collect the garbage from our fields. You don't really notice it, and you probably don't really, celebrate it. But when there is a strike of garbage collectors, everybody notices and everybody complains, and things start going bad. Next slide, please. This is exactly what happens when images like this in India, next slide, turn into images like this. In India, as I said, there was a decline of 95% of vultures across the country. And what happened is that carcasses in the country started to be left alone without scavengers, without vultures dealing with them. This caused an enormous problem. Next slide. Because without vultures, other species started to proliferate, including feral dogs, and this led, for example, to a huge increase on a huge epidemic of rabies, which cost the Indian state billions of dollars in terms of treatment, prevention, and feral dog eradication. Next slide, please. So vultures are really a fantastic help in scavenging, in dealing with the carcass. This image is a typical image of a scavenging scene, a dead sheep in a field that within and between the photograph on the top and the photograph on the bottom, there's only 2 hours. That within a couple of hours is completely cleaned by these most efficient scavengers in our ecosystems. Next slide, please. Vultures are under threat globally, and I will now go through the main threats that kill vultures in Europe, but also across the world. So this actually also applies to North America. Next slide, please. And this is based not on, episodic knowledge. It is based on real data. And why? Because the VCF runs what we call the European Vulture Mortality Database that has been collecting for decades data on mortality of the 4 species or the 5 species of European vultures across Europe. Next slide, please. This European mortality database has got, you can continue, Elise, has got now thousands of records, and this data that you show here is even relatively old. Mortality events across countries that allow us really to know what is killing vultures across Europe, allows us to analyze them and to identify patterns of vulture mortality across Europe. Next slide, please. This was very much put into work in the preparation of this document, which is really a seminal document. It's a document that has been adopted by the United Nations through the Convention for Migratory Species. This is really the old world vulture blueprint action plan for old world vulture conservation. Next slide, please. And in this document, and using our data and the data of our partners, we have actually mapped with hundreds of scientists what were the main priority threats killing vultures across the old world, divided by subregions with analysis at regional level. And this is really a summary of what we found out. Next slide, please. Number 1 threat to vultures in Europe and worldwide is poisoning. Poisoning, the ingestion of poison baits. Next slide, please. Now, this poisoning is not directed at vultures. You can go ahead, Liz. This poisoning is not directed at vultures, is directed at carnivores. Vultures are a collateral victim of a human-wildlife conflict. Carnivores, wolves, lynx, bear, foxes, and so on. You can pass, please. These foxes and wolves and carnivores, they kill either livestock or game species, and therefore livestock breeders or gamekeepers, they want to eliminate this problem. It is a true human-wildlife conflict, and what they do, unfortunately, is they use poison baits, which they lace with a potent chemical to kill the predators. They put these poison baits in nature, and of course, what happens is vultures, they don't recognize that these poison baits are poisoned. They descend upon these carcasses or part of carcasses laced with these chemicals, and they die in large numbers. Next slide, please. This is impacting everywhere, even today, even in Europe, even with all our conservation efforts. This picture shows a reintroduced bearded vulture that unfortunately got killed by poisoning in Spain only a couple of years ago. Next slide, please. This in Africa assumes a scale never seen before, and in the last decade there has been multiple events of hundreds of vultures killed because of poisoning due to human-wildlife conflict across the human landscape. And this is also causing what we call now the African vulture crisis. Next slide, please. Next slide. So in Spain, just to give you an idea, and this is only the tip of the iceberg, in about 25 years, we picked up over 6,000 endangered raptors killed by poisoning, including thousands of griffon vultures and hundreds of Cinereus vulture and Egyptian vulture. And as I mentioned, this is only the tip of the iceberg. The number of corpses collected in any given year is a minute part of the ones that are actually killed by poisoning. Next slide, please. Fortunately, we know this also because we've been identifying, evaluating, and analyzing the pattern of poisoning and the incidence of poisoning across Europe. One of our studies, for example, is the Balkan vulture poison study. Next slide, please, where we, for example, estimated that at least 20 vultures are poisoned annually on the Balkan Peninsula in the last 2 decades, killing hundreds and hundreds of vultures. Next slide, please. Now, this is illegal and has been illegal. It's an illegal activity. The poisoning of wildlife has been recognized as a very negative, impactful activity, and has been recognized as an illegal activity in legislation across the Western world, in North America and Europe as well. The problem is that, unfortunately, the enforcement agents have been ignoring what we can call a wildlife crime. And why? Because it is a crime that is difficult to solve, difficult to identify, and therefore, and also because, in some countries, police force have got other priorities, and therefore only less than 5% of the wildlife poisoning cases are actually solved or even investigated. This was the situation in Spain a few years ago. This means there is impunity, and you know what happens when there is impunity. When there is impunity, everybody keeps committing the action, even if it is illegal, because everybody knows that they will not get caught, and there will be no consequences. Next slide, please. Fortunately, Spain, of all the European countries, started a few years ago to recognize that this is a problem, and they actually developed national action plans against this threat, including involving the enforcement agencies and developing best practice and developing specialized investigative criminal procedures to start investigating and criminalizing this threat. Next slide, please. And the result of this is that from about 15-20 years ago, we started to see a reduction of poisoning cases in Spain. Next slide, please. So much so that, and you can continue, so much so that in the last few years, quite a few livestock breeders, quite a few gamekeepers that were doing this illegal activity have been condemned, taken to court, condemned, and obliged to pay a heavy fine and even service, go to prison in some cases because of the impact they caused in protected species. Next slide, please. This is another picture. There's been a steady decline, significant decline of poison cases in Spain throughout the recent years because of this approach. Next, Liz. So it has been reduced by 80%. And this is precisely the base of our main action dealing with this threat. It's an approach which we called the Wildlife Crime Academy, which we basically do is we use the Spanish best practice, we use the Spanish enforcement agencies, we use Spanish policemen, Spanish prosecutors, Spanish attorneys to convey the best practice that they've developed in the country to colleagues elsewhere in Europe through a training program which we called the Wildlife Crime Academy, so that they adopt these best practices and improve their procedures. Next slide, please. This is an active training course that so far has helped trained hundreds of professionals from lots of different countries in Europe. And it's a training course that is given by the Spanish authorities themselves with our facilitation. Next slide, please. Another threat to vultures, fortunately now receding, is direct persecution. Once very important, vultures were 100 years ago, 50 years ago, being killed, shot at by people. This practice is fortunately now relatively residual. Next slide. Even though it's still happening, and this picture is of a reintroduced bearded vulture in France that once again has been shot and killed by, I would not call it a hunter, I would call it a vandal with a gun, because hunting is not about the killing of illegal species. Hunting is a legal, legitimate operation that kills legal game species. This is really vandalism. This arrived to the French Ministry of Environment, that herself, asked the members of the public to try to give information about this case. Next slide. The second most important cause of mortality for vultures in Europe is electrocution. And this happens when vultures perch on medium tension electricity poles. Next slide, please. So when a vulture or a bird of prey for that matter, and the bigger the bird of prey is, the worse it is. When they perch on poles that particularly have got the conductors above the bar where they perch, and they touch on the line as well as on the pole itself, they are then electrocuted. Next slide, please. This causes a huge problem. Just to give you an idea, in Spain alone, it is estimated that 33,000 raptors are killed every year by electrocution. This causes mortality, direct mortality, and there is a lot of evidence for population level impact of electrocution on vultures and raptors. Configuration is key. Higher risk with upturned pins where the conductors are above the bar. And the problem is that this problem is huge. Just to give you an idea, France only has got 566,000 kilometers of medium tension lines, many of them constructed many years ago. So you can imagine that the scale of the problem. Next slide, please. The mitigation is relatively simple and inexpensive. What you just need to do is you just need to isolate for about 45 centimeters, half a meter, maybe up to a meter, with plastic or with tape, the cable, so that when the vulture or the raptor perches, or the soaring bird like storks perch on the pole, it does not really touch the wire. This is inexpensive, it is effective. The problem is that we need to do this in thousands and thousands of kilometers of medium tension lines. Next slide, please. Another problem or another threat is collision. And collision happens when the bird hits cables in poor weather, for example. Next slide. And you can see here, for example, a bearded vulture navigating through several cables of high tension line. Next slide, please. Again, the solution is very simple. You can put on these cables what we call bird diverters, which come in different shapes and forms. Some of them reflect, some of them turn with the wind. And basically, these cables, they help visualize the cable. And in periods of bad weather, fog, rain, and so on, they make them a lot more visible. Once again, it's inexpensive. The problem is the scale of the problem. We need to do this across thousands of miles of lines. Next slide, please. We have got a lot of data about the effectiveness of some of these bird diverters. Some of them are much more effective than others. In particular, those rotating fireflies, as we call them, are much better than other methods that are sometimes used, like the spirals. Next slide, please. And we've been even testing new technologies, including the use of drones to put in a cheaper way and much more effectively these diverters across the landscape. Next slide, please. I think this has been done and is being done by the electricity companies themselves. The only problem is that this is being done voluntarily at a very slow rate. The solution for this is for this operation to actually come under the liability of the companies, so that they need to internalize the costs and do it as part of the operations. Only then, through legislation, through regulation, will we achieve the widespread, large-scale mitigation that we need. Next slide, please. Next slide. Another problem, very large problem, is the collision of birds with wind farms, for which there is a lot of wealth of experience and evidence that can have a population level impact. Threat number 3, or number 4 in this case, that I would like to highlight, not as important as poisoning, and I'm talking here in European terms, not as important as poisoning and electrocution and collision, is veterinary diclofenac. This indeed was the main cause of decline of Indian vultures. In Europe, diclofenac is also present, is a non-steroid anti-inflammatory drug that is often given to cattle. But in Europe, it has been approved in Italy and then in Spain. There's been one vulture in Europe that has been killed by vet diclofenac in Europe. We have been lobbying the European Union to ban it. But the answer that we've been having is that unless there is widespread killing, they will not allow the banning of veterinary diclofenac. And to be true, because this medicine is subject to a veterinary prescription, and there are very clear indications on how it can be done, it looks like the prescription and regulatory environment in Europe is preventing this medicine to enter the vulture food chain, and therefore we are not seeing in Europe this veterinary medicine causing widespread mortality. Next slide, please. Food is an extremely important element in vultures. Without food, vultures do not exist. Next slide, please. And in fact, we've had a very clear demonstration of this in Europe quite a few years ago, in the end of the 90s, when what is called popularly the mad cow disease arrived in Europe. And what happened was the European Union and the European governments immediately responded with a blanket regulation that made obligatory for every single carcass of cattle livestock that was in our fields to be incinerated, because they were afraid that those carcasses could be an agent of transmission of the mad cow disease. 25 years ago, this led to a very abrupt decline of European vultures, because suddenly they found themselves without food. Next slide, please. So fortunately, the European Union then changed or modified their regulation and allow what it's called in Europe the fenced supplementary feeding stations, where carcasses are made available to vultures within a fenced area. And this is again because so that they don't really contact with live cattle, and therefore there is no possibility of transmission of disease. In Spain alone, there are really almost 200 of those supplementary feeding stations that provide 3 million kilos of meat annually to vultures. Next slide, please. And a few years later, this was even upgraded. The next slide, please. This was even upgraded to what we called the unfenced feeding areas, next slide please, which have now been implemented in Spain, and this is basically farms where some carcasses can actually be left alone for scavengers to consume. This has been increasing over the last few years, is now providing a minimum of 4 million kilos of meat annually, of carcasses annually to the vultures. Next slide. And has been in operation across Spain. This is the area in orange where this regulation has been implemented. Next slide, please. This also explains why Spain is today the European country with the most vultures. And this explains this neat research that basically shows that vultures that occur in the border area between Portugal and Spain almost never come to Portugal. And this is because in Portugal, we still abide by the old regulation of carcass incineration, compulsory carcass incineration, which means there is no food, while in Spain, carcasses are left for vulture consummation, and there is a lot of food. The habitat is exactly the same on the two sides of the border. Those points that you see there are movements of different birds. And what happens is it looks like there's almost an invisible wall. They don't come to Portugal simply because there's no food. Next slide, please. Another minor threat, which is major to your Californian condor, is lead. Lead has been banned from every single human use except one: lead ammunition used in hunting. Lead is poisoning to humans, is harmful to humans, is harmful to every single animals. If scavengers, vultures eat a lot of game meat, they will concentrate the lead, and they will end up having sublethal or lethal impact of lead poisoning. We are working in Europe to ban, and we are almost there, to actually ban lead ammunition used in our European fields and habitats. We are very close to a blanket ban of lead ammunition across Europe. Next slide. And so my second message: main threats to vultures in Europe and worldwide: poisoning and electrocution. Poisoning is a serious wildlife crime, needs to be combated with the help of enforcement agencies. Electrocution is a serious problem. The way forward is for this issue to be part of the liability of the operations of the utilities, and availability of food is an extremely important factor for vultures. Next slide, please. I will then very quickly give you an insight into a story, a fantastic story, which is the reintroduction of the bearded vulture in the Alps, one of the species of European vultures. Next slide, please. Bearded vultures are unique because they eat bones, and you can see here in the X-ray a bearded vulture with a huge bone that it has just ingested. Next slide, please. It's a species that lives or lived from Europe to Central Asia. There is a different subspecies living in Africa. Next slide, please. But in Europe, it was almost hunted to extinction. And the last bearded vulture in the Alps, this is actually the real picture of the last bearded vulture in the Alps, was killed in 1913. Next slide, please. So in 1980, there was only really 70 breeding pairs of bearded vultures left, mostly in the Pyrenees, with a few island populations here and there, the species on the brink of extinction. Next slide, please. So in the 70s, a number of visionaries, next slide, really started a project which was to bring back this species to the Alps, which by then had mitigated all the main threats. They managed to get a grant from the Frankfurt Zoological Society, and this is the document, from 1992 that showed this grant that allowed them to actually purchase the 30 bearded vultures that were alive in European zoos to start a captive breeding program. Next slide, please. And this is really it started in the 80s, even before that it started in the 80s. And from these 30 birds we've developed painstakingly a captive breeding program. Next slide, please. A captive breeding program that exists to date. Next slide. A captive breeding program that, very little, you can pass it, Elise. Very little, that includes guidelines for artificial incubation and so on. Next slide, please. Of bearded vultures, which we still do across Europe. Next slide. Next, please. We call this an EEP. It's a program, a captive breeding program from an endangered species. The uniqueness of this captive breeding program run by the VCF is that all the stock is centrally owned, is owned by us, and is managed by us. We have constructed specialized captive breeding centers, which, as you see, are absolutely crucial. We manage very intensively this captive stock, and we team up with a number of zoos that also receive our birds. Next slide, please. This is a photo of one of these specialized captive breeding centers, in this case, one constructed in Spain. Next slide, please. There is a second one also built in Spain. The next one, please. And a third one built in Austria. Next, please. We've developed over the years all the guidelines for housing, for welfare, for artificial incubation, for chick rearing, absolutely everything you need to know about these birds and captive breeding of these birds. Next slide, please. And to date, today, 30 years later, we've got almost 200 bearded vultures in captivity, distributed among these specialized captive breeding centers, but crucially also in almost 40 zoos that receive our birds as long as they build an aviary according to our guidelines. Next slide, please. As a result, we have been able to produce over 700 in these last almost 50 years of effort, almost 700 chicks. More than half of them have been released in a number of projects, the vast majority of which in the Alps. Next slide, please. Next. This is the distribution of the chicks that have been reintroduced. As you can see, the first and the main project is in the Alps. And then from 2006, we started with other reintroduction projects in Andalusia, in the Causses, in other Spanish mountains, and more recently this year in Bulgaria. Next slide, please. Next, I will not go into this. So captive breeding for reintroduction clearly works. It is a very slow and expensive process, but has got no impact on wild populations. We have developed the techniques. We have produced the guidelines. The secret for success in our case is that the captive bred stock is centrally owned by us and managed entirely for conservation. And these specialized captive breeding centers, where there is a critical mass of individuals, is absolutely key. It is important, though, to be that zoos are also part of this. Next slide. Once the birds are reared, they are then taken to the mountains, and next slide, and put in what we call, next slide please, their hacking caves, where they pass the last few weeks of their period before fledgling. Next slide. Closely monitored. They are tagged. They are marked with dyed feathers. Next slide. As you can see here, this is the 23 birds that we released last year, all of them with an individual dyed pattern. Next slide, please. They are tagged, all of them are tagged, so we've got hundreds of individuals tagged with a wealth of data and evidence. Next slide, please. They are monitored there for 24/7, night and day, until they fledge. Next slide. All this data is then put into what a centralized IBM, what we call an International Bearded Vulture Monitoring Database that uses harmonized monitoring methods and protocols, a common database that is then made available to all partners. Next slide, please. We partner up with dozens of organizations across the Alps. Next slide. And these are the results. We started releasing the Alps in 1986. The first breeding in the wild, these birds take 10 years to mature. First breeding in the wild started in 1997, and the population grew exponentially. Last year, in 2024, we had more than 60 wild-fledged individuals fledgling from the wild population, far greater than the small number of birds that we reintroduced in the Alps. The population now totals over 100 pairs. This population is restored, healthy, and very soon we will finish with this reintroduction project. Next slide, please. This is really the last slide before I pass to Elise with a final element of that we would like to leave you, a program that is eminently also relevant for North America, more on the communication side. But this is the last slide that I want to show you, which is this project has had huge success. The exponential growth of the wild population. The number of released birds is actually decreasing and will stop very soon. Success, mission accomplished. The Bearded Vulture in the Alps is back on our horizon, and we can successfully close this picture. Elise, I will ask you to pass the next few slides, which I will not go through until the IVAD, and I will pass really the word to you because of time, for you to now really cover one program that the VCF is also running, called the International Vulture Awareness Day, that is global, is applicable to America, and that is eminently relevant to North America. And then very happy to answer some of the questions. I'm sorry for taking a little bit too much time, but the fact that I cannot share the slides also increased a little bit the time consumption. Elise, go on.
Yes, I will be super quick. So we have a partnership, and we are coordinating an yearly event called the International Vulture Awareness Day. It runs in the first weekend of September. It has been running for a few years, and recently we started coordinating this effort. We created a website which you can visit to follow what is being prepared and events running in September every year. You can also find a lot of information there about vultures. The goal of this day and of this communication project initiative is to spread awareness, to create community, and to change the image of vultures for the general population. So on the website you have lots of resources. You can, of course, this is worldwide, so you can, of course, participate and launch your own events for the awareness day. There's recommendations for planning activities. There's also resources for children's activities. I will be super quick. There's also a media kit for using social media, and lots of fact sheets that you can use. Here are some examples of the social media toolkit. We are encouraging everyone to launch their events, to prepare and to register events going from August to September. And there's lots of types of online or local events that you can prepare. These are some examples of the communication material that we produce, and it includes quizzes, some fact checks about vultures. The idea is really for the general public to change the image of vultures, and so that we know our wildlife better, and we know exactly what the importance that they have. So this is what you can find on the website. Lots of tools that you can use, some activities for kids, and for different audiences. I will show some examples of events that were organized in the last few years, and this can be for any kind of organization or for individuals, or private groups. These are the outcomes from the 2025 IVAD. As you can see, there's a lot of events and activities going on worldwide. I received some communication from our communication department saying that in the US we only had 25 activities. So I encourage you to organize more, and to promote the information about the New World species of vultures. And here are some examples of activities that were organized. It can be presentations of documentaries, online quizzes. Some of them here are from the US. There were some webinars on vultures, some picnics. It's really endless, the kind of the type of activities that you can do and register on this website. And this is from me. I just would like to thank you for the opportunity to present our work, and I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit more now in the question part. José, I don't know if you want to finish the presentation. José, you're mute. Sorry.
No, Liz, thank you very much. This is our team saying hi to you all in North America. Obviously, I have to thank all my staff for their hard work. There's a couple more slides, Liz. Obviously, I need to thank our donors that allow for this work to take place. And one final slide, if you want to follow us on social media, these are the different channels that we have. You can read news almost every day about our different projects on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, our website as well. Thank you for the opportunity. Sorry for taking a little bit more time than we should. Happy to answer questions. And I think there's one final slide that we need to put up. Yes.
You can, Jose, you can go back one slide, or at least, and just keep that up for the question period, so people have a chance to follow some of those links. But go ahead, Susie, if you want to start with questions.
Yes, thank you both so much. That was so interesting. And there definitely were questions. The first question came from Frank, and it's a turkey vulture question. So Jose, you can answer it, but then Julie, pipe in too. And the question is, are turkey vultures true migrants? A study in the 1980s and 90s found that many return within a few months from the time they left to the time they return. So what's the deal with turkey vultures?
If you allow me, well, I was 2 months ago in Costa Rica, and I can tell you that they are true migrants, because I've seen tens of thousands of turkey vultures migrating to Central America, the southern parts of Central America and South America. I think the deal is, and I'm not an expert of New World vultures, there are some populations which are sedentary. There's been some publication, for example, now published recently, that showed that, for example, some turkey vultures in the southernmost states of the USA, are sedentary, but the bulk of the North American population is migratory, and indeed winters in Central and Southern America, and they go there in their hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I'll just add to that, Frank. Yeah, some, like Jose said, some are sedentary, some, as they are pushing more further north in North America, and our winters are getting more mild. Some of them may not be migrating as far, some of them staying put through the winter if they can. But definitely a lot of them are migratory, and what's funny is they're always on the move. So in places like where Elise and I counted down in Costa Rica, if you stay there long enough in December, you'll see all these rivers of vultures go from north to heading south to start moving north again, because they are kind of always on the move, but depending on where you are in the world, I guess. Sometimes they're moving a lot, sometimes not so much.
That's great. Thank you both so much. Okay, here's another question. This is from Nora. They were curious about what proportion of the 80% reduction in wildlife poisoning is attributed to decreased wildlife numbers.
Thank you very much, Nora. In fact, in Europe, we have actually been we have more wildlife than we had 50 or 60 years ago. Europe, and this is partly because of regulation of very, very strong and important laws, because of funding. The European Union and European governments have been dedicating a little bit more money to biodiversity conservation. So the general picture is that predators, birds of prey, large mammals, and all that, they've all been increasing in Europe in the last 2 or 3 decades. There are now more vultures, more wolves, more bears, more lynx in Europe than they were 50 years ago or 60 years ago. So in fact, there's more animals now than in the past. We had a bit of, I think we reached the bottom of the pits in the 70s, in the 80s of the last century. So this decrease of poisoning is real, and it is due to the work of the enforcement agencies in investigating and criminalizing this activity, wildlife poisoning, which is illegal and has got a widespread impact on wildlife. So it is really a real, and one evidence of this is that the country that dealt with this problem in the most effective way, which is Spain, is also the country which has got 90% of European vultures. Where you correct poisoning, you then have vultures, and this is really the best evidence.
Wow, I want to say how inspiring Europe is to me here in the US, and I won't say anything more, but way to go. It's so inspiring. We have just a few more questions. I hope you don't mind. We'll try and get them in. So there was a question from Julie and I together. We wondered about feeding stations, and are feeding stations being considered or used in other countries besides Spain? And I was curious about if you could describe what the feeding station actually looks like, how they keep it sort of separate.
Yes, so what we call supplementary feeding stations, they are used across Europe. As I mentioned, they were necessary in the first place when those regulations that made compulsory the incineration of all carcasses came about. It's not something that, in the ideal world, we would like the vultures to feed sustainably on prey without the help of supplementary feeding stations. And what we are advocating is what happens now in Spain, which is livestock breeders and hunters are allowed to leave hunting remains and carcasses of cattle for vultures to consume. And this is really the most sustainable and the ideal situation. In countries where they are not allowed to do that, and Portugal, for example, is one such country, you've got this middle way stop-gag solution, which is actually having these supplementary feeding stations. How do they look like? It's a fenced area. and it's fenced because of these veterinary, considerations of disease transmission and so on. So a fenced area where authorized individuals go and deposit carcasses that are collected and and are validated by veterinaries to be consumed by vultures, so they don't have diclofenac, and so on. They don't have lead, and so on, and they are deposited there in a place which is good for vultures to land and then take off. They are now increasingly associated sometimes with tourism. Quite a few individuals have built heights next to these supplementary feeding stations, which of course offer fantastic opportunities for taking photos of birds, and particularly in places where we are reintroducing or reinforcing restocking populations. They are an important conservation tool in the sense that they allow for food availability. They allow for available food to be present. We know that they will not starve. They allow for safe food to be present. We know that the food there is safe, contrary to some possible food elsewhere, which might not be so safe in terms of lead or in terms of veterinary medicines or in terms of poison. So they are an important conservation tool. Of course, we don't want to habituate vultures to them. This is a danger, and this is an element of it. And I've seen in a couple of places where a white van comes every Monday to bring, hundreds of kilos of piglets coming from the slaughterhouse to the vultures. The vultures recognize the white van, and they fly immediately in, and they are sometimes starting to feed next to the white van. This, of course, might be great for photos, but it's not really what we want in terms of a sustainable wild population, because the problem is that if for some reason that practice is finished, the vultures then are completely dependent on something which is a little bit artificial, and then they will suffer. So we use them a lot. They are a fantastic conservation tool. We see them as a step towards a system in which they feed naturally, picking up carcasses from livestock or from wild ungulates or from hunting remains in a much wider area.
Wow, questions keep rolling in. Julie, do we have time for maybe like 2 more questions?
That's fine, as long as José and Elise are okay, hanging on a
Perfect.
few minutes. Okay,
Okay,
Perfect.
thanks.
No problem at all.
Okay, and if you don't get your question answered, you can check out the VCF website. You might be able to find your answers there, or the Hawk Migration Association website too. So Yvonne's wondering, what is the substitute for, and bear with me as I try to say this, diclofenac being used
Yes.
where it's banned?
There is a substitute. There's lots of anti-inflammatory or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. There is only one which has been tested and is safe for vultures, which is called meloxicam. It's exactly the same principles, causes the same, is used in the same treatments and for the same problems, except that the active principle is different. It's available. It's just a question of choice. It's called meloxicam. And it is not diclofenac, by the way. At least in Europe, it's called Voltaren. We use it a lot in our, whenever you've got a muscular pain, you can take it as pills or you can take it as cream. In Europe, it's called Voltaren. It's extremely widespread use for humans and for animals. The problem is that it is toxic for vultures.
Yeah, we have that here in the US, and we also have meloxicam, which I give to my dog who has bad arthritis. So that's good to know that anyway. All right, the last question that was asked a couple of times recently is about vultures spreading diseases from feeding on carcasses such as mad cow and bird flu. I think you touched on that, but could you talk a little bit more about it?
That's very good. That's a very good question. Thank you for the question. Well, first of all, vultures actually, their gut, and we are doing quite a lot of research on it. Their gut is special, very acidic. Vultures actually can eat carcasses with tuberculosis and other diseases, and because their gut is so acidic and so specific, they actually eliminate pathogens. They are, though, and this is really important, though, they suffer from some new emerging diseases, zoonoses, that we are very worried about. Like any other single bird species, they also suffer from bird flu, avian flu, and we've had bouts and episodes of bird flu in European vulture colonies. They are now increasingly suffering from West Nile virus. It's a virus that again is associated with mosquitoes that didn't used to live in Europe, but are now living in Europe from Africa because of climate change, and they suffer from West Nile viruses. So this is something that worries us. In nature, usually, avian flu and this type of virus are then, there's some sort of a balance and populations, develop immunity. In captivity, this can cause a lot of problems. So in a nutshell, they do not really, rather than transmitting diseases, they help to actually break the disease transmission. They are, though, prone to be affected by some viruses, like avian flu and West Nile, which is something to look for.
Thank you so much, Jose and Elise. This was really fascinating. I am in love with vultures. I already was, but now I'm extra in love with them, and so inspired by the actions that Europe has taken. I know, Julie, you have some things to share too.
Yes, I will echo what Susie says and just thank you both so much for taking the time to share with us today. Everything you're doing, it's such critically important work and we appreciate it. It's very frustrating and heartbreaking to see so many just preventable threats facing vultures, but encouraging to see that the progress you've been able to make and like captive breeding efforts is wonderful. So thank you so much. Switching gears for next month, if you want to forward to the next slide, Elise, we are still working on our January Lunch and Learn plans. So that will be coming out soon on our e-newsletter and social media, etc. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. If you like programming like Lunch and Learn, we encourage you to join our kettle and become a member. Your support allows us to provide education programs like this and supports our hawk count database. And helps us support the Raptor Monitoring Network. So thanks everybody for joining today. We wish everybody a happy holiday season and wishing you a Raptor and Vulture full new year. Thanks everyone. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.